Good morning. My name is Scott Redler, Chief Strategic Officer at T3Live.com. Welcome to today's morning call.
And I'm Chelsea Oliver. Welcome to today's morning call.
Wait, I said that.
I know, we both said it. We're just welcoming everyone, right?
Yeah, I jumped the gun.
It's Monday.
Yes, it is. It's another new week.
Yes. So we have mixed markets around the world today. Europe is broadly higher as the DAX is up over 1%. Asia, most of Asia is closed. How do things overseas look today?
It seems like a lot of the same. To end last week, the European markets were weaker, but then we had a nice move and now they're up, so we'll see if that continues. If you look here at the EWG, which we like to use, which is a proxy for Germany, first time the EWG came to the 200-day, it got rejected, pulled in, but you know what? It held the 21-day. So we talk about when sectors and stocks are above the 8 and 21-day, there's some momentum. So, the EWG still looks good. It's been above this ever since this 24 area. If you want to take a closer look here, you'll see it like this. And now we'll see, next time it gets up to the 200-day, does it take it out? So right now it's filling this gap right here, or you'll see it filling this gap, and then we'll see if there's any more. But overall, not the strongest, sector or strongest area in the world because of the strong euro, but overall, as long as this, I would say 25 area holds, you can't get too bearish here, and most of Asia is closed. I think the Nikkei is open and was off a little small.
On Friday, our market started lower and reversed up, keeping the bulls in control. S&P futures are up 5 now. Do you think this trend can keep up for the 7th week in a row?
Well, people have been saying it can't after the 4th week, after the 5th week, and the 6th week, and then on Friday, the bears had, they had their opportunity again, and they showed no power. The futures are down like 8, 9 handles on a decent jobs report, strong, some holes in it, but whatever. And then we talked about 3 different pivot areas where you'd have to make some adjustments if the market wanted to reverse. So if you look here at the chart of the SPX, you will see, the market opened below, all right, this pivot, which was right here. So, in my morning note, I'm like, if we stay below, 2052 to 2056, risk off, back above, cover your shorts, and look for opportunities. Well, we held the 8-day again, and then we actually even took out, the pivot high here. So that closed strong. So the future's up a little bit. It's probably good for traders. So the question is, can the market have enough staying power to get up, towards this, 2100 zone at this point? As long as it stays above the 8-day, and look where the 21-day is, you can't get too bearish. The market took back these moving averages right around here, and if you missed the double bottom that happened, over the start of the year, this was your spot to get involved, and the trend since has been strong. And until this trend changes, try and stay with it. Don't fight it.
The Qs led the way Friday, which is always good if you're a bull. What are the next levels you'll be watching here?
Well, the Qs are the ETF for technology. Whenever technology leads, it's healthier than commodities and some other sectors. So, at this point, every time we've had these down opens, the first thing to go green usually has been, the Qs. So it's a good proxy to look at. And if you look here at the Qs right now, you'll see, it's been above the 8 and the 21-day right here since, what is that, about 100. And, look at the trend since, all the way to the upside. So here's when it engulfed this inside range. Then all of a sudden you held the 8-day again, and now all of a sudden, you have this, this gap that can get filled up to, what is that? That is 111.84. So if you happen to have bought the dip on Friday and you're up today, trim and trail and just keep managing the positions. At this point, technology has been very strong, and you can't fight it. And until, again, you get a crazy close below this or some type of real big topping tail, which we haven't seen yet, just try and stay with the trend.
Small caps held the 8-day and reversed higher. Scott, I know you mentioned a potential for small caps to reach the 200-day. Do you think this is the week that they might hit it?
It might be the week. I think the last 2 weeks I've talked about, how that could be a magnet, especially if the market stays intact, and, buying the dips in the IWM or even playing some breakouts at some points have rewarded some traders. And if you look here at the IWM, you'll see that it had that overthrow low, a little bit different than some other sectors to start, but then you had your quick 4-day move, feisty move, shorts covering, and then this really is when you could have switched gears and got long when it held and went sideways. Okay, then since taking out resistance, it's been above the 8 and the 21 day. So, here's been that spot. Right here looked a little bit testy. Remember, we were talking about, can this be, a head and shoulders pattern? Okay, well, it wasn't when it got negated right here. When the market blasted above 108.50, that was your spot to get out. And now look at it. Held the 8 day right here. Nice little flag. The 200 days at 112 and change. If you're long it, you want to sell a little bit into it, that's fine. But ultimately, it's still trending well. Some sectors are holding above the 21 day. Some are not even getting there and just holding the 8 day. But at this point, the action in the small caps is also encouraging for the bulls, and we'll stay with that until it changes.
The bios, which we mentioned Thursday, perked up and then reclaimed the 50-day on Friday for the first time this year. What are the levels here? What are your thoughts?
Well, on Thursday I talked about, getting in some options because I didn't really trust the sector. Laggard sectors that go last.
And you bought options, right?
Yes, I did.
How are they treating you?
So far, so good.
Good.
I did trim a little bit on Friday into the strength, but I still have over half my calls. On RAA, I tweeted on Thursday, I'm like, you know what? I'm buying some, IBB calls because, if the rally continues, this could play catch up, but if it doesn't, it's the weakest group and it could fail, so I didn't want to be in the ETF itself because, risk is premium paid. But anyway, you go on Friday, the market opened lower, and boom, this for the first time took out the 50-day. So that's nice to see. You had, some decent sideways consolidation. Remember I said some guys were looking for a double bottom here? Well, they got it, and now we're above this spot. So, if you want to look at, some resistance now, you have some small resistance coming in above 270, but then really, there's nothing up until about 280. I don't think it's going to hit the 200-day, but, this would be my target. So I'll sell a little bit more calls above 270, and then I'll try and stay in some till at least 280. The timing on it was the April 15th call, so we'll see. Overall, though, it's trading much better than it's been recently, and we'll see if that continues.
Oil had a down week, but the markets didn't seem to care. What levels do you think need to break for the overfocus to return here?
Everyone was so enamored with oil when it was below 30, and then once it got above 30, people were like, okay, can it hold it? And then at 40, everyone's starting to talk about 50, and now, here we are, and oil slipped below 38. So I would say maybe below 35, everyone's going to start wondering again, is the rally over in oil, and that could raise some eyebrows. So for now, though, look at the USOs. You'll see that, it did turn lower. It held the 50-day right here. So this would be, my line in the sand if I was looking at oil very close or long, which I'm not. So, I'm looking at it, but I'm not long it. So anyway, see if it could get into this gap today. It's up a little bit, but if it were to open up and start trading below, just say 933, I think the market notices a little bit. And if you go to the XLE, which is a sector, that kind of that obviously corresponds to it, it's been trying to hold this 60-40. So if oil turns lower and the market wants to retrace lower, this could be the first group that some traders turn to short because the 60-40 is right here. But ultimately, still hanging around. It's been, it gave you a nice move here when the pattern was tight. So at this point, 60-40 is key. If it stays above it, don't try and short it. If it breaks below it and the market starts to weaken, it could give you a move to the 50-day, kind of like what the actual commodity did. So, I would watch this a little bit closer, for both ways.
We have a lot of individual stock movement with high beta tech continually giving us opportunities. What do you think about Google, Amazon, and Netflix today as we start the week?
Well, Netflix was like the overfocus last week with Amazon, actually, and it wound up being really good for people. You had two different ways to treat Netflix. You had a quick move above the pivots that we listed, and then it actually came back and retested those and held, and then gave you some power on Friday. You look here at the chart of Netflix. Last week I put the chart up on Twitter, when it was going sideways here, to basically look to be a buyer above, 101.40 and 102.40, and then on that, I think it was Wednesday, it hit 104. I actually sold most of it. And then, you look at it a little closer, it came in with some, which was a little bit, not testy, but, anyone who was still long, it were like, wow, I wonder if it's going to fail, and it didn't. And then it gave you another push up on Friday. So at this point, this downtrend has been, broken for a little bit of time. It's now back above the 8-day, above the 21-day, and buying dips has worked. Buying highs actually have worked a little bit. So Netflix is trending better. and when I gave you this strategy, I talked about this being, a target which was a little bit, north of 107. So we'll see what happens there. You have Friday's high of 105, 79. Amazon, to me, I'm going to watch it a little bit today. You have another bull flag type pattern. Remember this red dog reversal back here. Since then, quick move up, wasn't ready to break above resistance, needed this extra day in the middle, and then went. And then now on Friday, it held the 8-day, and now you have another bull flag type pattern here. So maybe above, what's this? This is 603.24. It continues to the upside. This has been a very strong name. Google has been not as impressive as I would have thought. Choppy from day to day, but it's still above the 8 and the 21-day. Gave you a bit of a reversal on Friday, and I guess this is your next little point of reference. This has been harder versus the other high beta names, in my humble opinion. So, if you're not having success because it's a little loose and wide, just watch it because, when it's strong, the other ones like to be strong, and the other ones are a little bit easier to trade, in my opinion.
Apple got another price target raise today. Scott, I know you're long it still. What is your price target?
Well, I was thinking that we get through the 200-day at some point, or at least kiss it. And we've seen how first kisses get rejected, and then if you get another chance, maybe you get to second base. Well, this was your first kiss, and now all of a sudden you had a nice little red dog reversal around this pivot that we talked about in the note Friday, 108.60, closed okay. Got an upgrade this morning, so we'll see how it deals with this 111-ish. Okay. It's been trending much better. If you look on Twitter, we posted this chart right here, and then when it held here, it continued, and you had a gap that held, which showed some power. Now another gap that held, and I guess if you want to use a pivot, use 110.42. If it could stay above 110.42, stay long it. If it happens to stretch and come back and close below and give you a topping tail, then I'd probably be out of it. But for right now, it's still acting pretty well.
Tesla came out with more news Friday that over 275,000 reservations have been made for the new, cheaper priced model. They were able to sell this news Friday. Do you think they can sell it again today?
I think it's going to be trickier. I tweeted also on Friday, I'm like, I wouldn't be buying 250. I don't know if it's a short. And then meanwhile, it wound up coming in all day. And that was on like 130,000 reservations. Now we're at 275, which if you put that in perspective, I think they said the BMW electric car, didn't sell more than 100,000 for a year. So anyway, people want this, and granted, it's only a $1,000 reservation. It's like a promissory, whatever, and they're not going to get it to 2018. But it's still impressive numbers. If we just look at the chart for what it is, it had a huge move off of this V bottom at 140. If you remember, this is when Citron put their short note out, and obviously the stock said no, and then you had this sell into this resistance area. So I would write down this pivot. This pivot is 247.90. If it stays around here and doesn't pull back, you could get another squeeze. But I guess if it can't get through there and sellers get control, they sold the news here. Some think that they need to do a secondary, guys, meaning that they're going to have to raise some money to manufacture all these vehicles. But since it's so far in the future, it could be in a few weeks. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. So just trade within your means here, and this is your pivot. I would say above 247.90. Do not be short. Maybe you long for a squeeze. If it goes above, comes back below it, then you have your tactical strategy to short against for it to maybe do the same thing Friday. But my gut tells me it's going to be a little bit harder to sell this the way it was on Friday. But we'll see.
In social media, there's some news that Facebook will delay its shipping of its virtual reality product due to a part shortage. I know the stock is lower pre-market. What is your strategy here?
Well, I'm also long this. It was a great pickup on Friday. It was lower, it reversed, it was strong. So there's probably a lot of traders long this, which, this happens. Everyone's like, oh, isn't this a 2017 story? Why does it matter? When stocks are near all-time highs, they're always a little bit testy. You have shorts who are trying to make sure it doesn't get through, and then you have guys who don't want to be the last ones in there. So for today, we'll figure out, does it really matter that much? Because it was also a price target raise. So anyway, you look at the chart of Facebook, it's had an unbelievable move, and here's the old highs, which it's, knocking on the door. It held the 8-day and engulfed it and gave you a big move. So let's just take a closer look, to where we are now. So, at this point, you could treat it a few different ways. So let's talk. let's talk. Who said that? Joan Rivers? Anyway, this was, the Red Dog reversal on Friday, where it boom and it came up. So if you go to your 5-minute chart to see where there's some support, okay, you look at right here. To me, I'm long it. I'm probably going to add a little bit into this 114.50. I'm not exactly sure where it is now. This was your first push up and it held. It'll make life a lot easier if this holds, for longs, for anyone who's long and adds to it here. If this doesn't hold, then I'm going to probably be, getting rid of my ad, and then I'm going to wait for some kind of 15, 30-minute support. And if that doesn't hold, you know what, even though I don't think the highs of the year are in and they'll be fine with this, my stop will be at the low here because I'm not just going to sit in it, if it happens to care and get down to the 21-day, etc. But, I'm going to try and, nibble on it. It could be an opportunity. But again, we'll have to figure that out, and the stock will have to tell us versus everyone else with their opinions about what's going to happen there.
Metals have been working lower, and they held the 50-day Friday. What level was that, and where do you see this going? Do you have interest here?
Not really. It started the year off, fast, and then it got very random and erratic, and traders don't like random and erratic. We like, consistency and follow through. And in the past 2 weeks, it would close strong, open down, close down, open up, and guys trying to day trade it were getting chopped up. But anyway, if you look at the chart overall, it's still, hanging in there. Okay, you're allowed to, hit the 50-day and still be okay and have like this longer channel. But at this point, if it doesn't hold Friday's low of 115.55, I would take a little care. I like when things trend above the 8-day, like when you took off, boom, and then strong, 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 open up, let it catch up, open up, let it catch up, and then for me, I started getting away from it on this topping tail right there, and then I haven't really done much with it since. But if you're a bit longer term, make sure this holds. If this doesn't hold, you have this spot underneath, and then you have the 200-day. And if I'm just saying, you don't need to hold your nose and go underwater if you're not midterm on it. So here's your support. So I would use that. This upper range is getting a little bit more tricky. But again, I guess if you sold here, you could be a buyer versus this, and who knows, maybe you just got involved at a nice end of the range.
Now we're starting a new week, a new month, and a new quarter here. Are there any closing thoughts?
A lot of new horizons.
A lot of new.
So, but new is good because a lot of people didn't do as well as they would have liked to last month or last quarter. So what I would say to that is, don't revenge this month, this quarter because you sold things too early or you started shorting too early. Treat this as a new month, a new quarter, and use those moving averages. On Friday, I came in flat. I was like, what? I actually had options on. I was like, I want to see what's next. And then all of a sudden we opened lower, and throughout the course of the day we took back 3 different pivot areas and closed strong. I'm like, all right, we're still intact. Let's just look at the spiders because the spiders is something that we all trade. What could you have done if you were short? You know what? You could have covered when A, the 8-day got reclaimed, or B, this low of 205.33 got reclaimed, and you're not sitting in pain again. Okay, or you could have got long there and been a seller and said, wow, nice day-and-a-half trade on this engulfing bar. Happened here also. So anyway, you do have resistance further up, into this area. So kind of kiss it and come in. Does it blast through? At this point, let's take it day by day and watch all the individual setups. At this point, until you get a hard close below the 8-day, which you could even get one to the 21-day, this rally is intact. And you even have the banks trending, even though they're lagging. Maybe the banks want to catch up and go to the 200-day. You had the bios just start to get involved. So ultimately, Chelsea, lots to do looking for setups versus just looking for tops. And if people follow people on Twitter that are just ranting about tops and saying this isn't going to end well, well, this isn't going to end well isn't a trading strategy that's going to make you money.
Right. All right. Thank you. That concludes today. Everyone have a great trading day.